Have you ever felt like modern life is just a little too safe? Almost boring. When you compare our world today with the planet's wild past, it's hard not to feel like something is missing. Whether you picture the age of dinosaurs or just 26,000 years ago during the height of the last ice age, back then, giants seemed to walk beside almost every ordinary animal. What happened to that version of Earth? The answer is sobering. Around 11,700 years ago, a massive extinction event wiped out roughly 65% of the world's megafauna: woolly mammoths, cave lions, giant rhinos, and countless other colossal creatures. Since then, the planet has felt quieter, smaller, and strangely emptier. But here's the truly mysterious part: that ancient disaster wasn't the end. In just the last 300 years, we've kept losing more giants. And these weren't small or insignificant animals. So what exactly counts as a giant? For this video, we're talking about any animal heavier than 100 pounds. In the last 3 centuries, at least 13 impressive species over 100 pounds have disappeared forever, and one group was hit harder than all the rest. Could gentle giants on remote islands really have suffered the biggest losses? The answer is yes. The giant tortoises. 5 entire species vanished in this short period, accounting for more than 38% of all recent megafauna extinctions. These were the saddle-backed Rodriguez tortoise, the Mauritius saddle-backed tortoise, the domed Mauritius tortoise, the domed Rodriguez tortoise, and the Reunion giant tortoise. All of them were peaceful plant eaters living across the Indian Ocean islands. Scientists think they shared a relatively recent common ancestor, and each could reach nearly 1,000 pounds heavier than a grizzly bear. What made them so fascinating were their unique shells and long necks. The Rodriguez saddle-backed tortoise looked the most otherworldly, with a dramatically curved shell and an incredibly long neck built for reaching high vegetation. It must have seemed like a creature from another time. But here's the haunting question. What happens when a slow, friendly giant meets humans for the first time? The first sailors, Arab and later Portuguese, probably encountered them centuries earlier, but official records only began when the French and Dutch colonized the islands in the 17th century. These tortoises had never learned to fear people. They were tame, curious, and painfully easy to catch. Their large size and slow pace made them perfect targets for hungry crews. Soon, the slaughter wasn't just for meat. People wanted their fat and oil, too. And as settlements grew, humans brought pigs, dogs, cats, goats, and rats that destroyed nests and habitats. Thousands more were loaded onto ships as living food supplies. By the 18th century, all 5 species were collapsing. By the early 19th century, most had vanished. The very last confirmed sighting came in 1844 on Round Island near Mauritius. A few large tortoises were still alive, but the island was overrun by rabbits. 20 years later, when someone finally returned, they were gone. The romantic age of sail, the era of discovery and tall ships, turned out to be a nightmare for these ancient giants. And yet, their story is only the beginning. The next unfortunate soul in this tragic story is the Caribbean monk seal, a creature that had the terrible luck of meeting humans very early on. Its story begins in 1494, during Christopher Columbus's second voyage. While anchored near the lonely island of Alto Velo, his crew discovered a colony of these seals lounging on the beach. In that first fateful encounter, they killed 8 of them for food and scientific curiosity. These were impressive animals. Adults could reach 8 feet in length, with large males weighing up to 600 pounds. What made them especially striking was their unusual appearance. Algae often grew on their fur, giving them a mysterious pale greenish hue over their brownish-gray bodies. They lived in social groups of 20 to 100 individuals, and like so many island species we've lost, they were remarkably gentle and showed almost no fear of humans. They once thrived in the warm, shallow waters of the Caribbean Sea, the Gulf of Mexico, and the Western Atlantic. Their diet consisted mainly of fish and crustaceans. While they had to watch out for great white sharks, tiger sharks, and the occasional orca, none of these natural predators ever came close to what humans would do to them. At first, the hunting was opportunistic, sailors simply taking them for fresh meat. But by the late 1600s, as European colonies expanded and plantations spread across the islands, the seals became a commercial target. Hundreds were slaughtered daily, not just for food, but for their thick blubber, which was turned into oil to lubricate machines and fuel lamps. By 1850, they had grown so scarce that hunting them was no longer profitable. Yet the damage was irreversible. Even afterward, they continued to be captured for zoos and scientific study. One expedition alone took 42 individuals, most of whom died quickly in captivity. In the wild, they could live up to 20 years, but that lifespan was rapidly shrinking. The last known seal to be killed was recorded in Texas in 1939. The final confirmed sighting of a living one came in 1952 off Serenia Bank. Since then, all reported sightings have been dismissed as misidentifications, usually hooded seals. What makes this story especially heartbreaking is how these peaceful, intelligent animals were reduced to nothing more than a convenient resource, killed so we could light our streets and grease our machines. The next giant to disappear was the Japanese sea lion, the second pinniped on our list, and one with a much deeper history with humans. This remarkable animal was once the largest land-walking creature in all of Japan. People had been living alongside it for over 40,000 years. But here's the question. How does a powerful predator that survived for thousands of years suddenly vanish in just a few centuries? Physically, these sea lions were impressive. The largest males reached 8.2 feet in length and weighed up to 1,230 pounds heavier than the Ussuri brown bear, which is Japan's largest land animal today. They had sleek, powerful bodies, incredibly sharp teeth designed for gripping and piercing, and were masterful hunters feeding on fish, squid, octopus, and even rockfish. They once roamed the Northwest Pacific, particularly along the coasts of Japan and the Korean Peninsula. For most of history, humans hunted them sustainably. During the Jomon period from 14,000 BC to 300 BC, people took them occasionally, but the population remained stable. Everything changed in the 18th century. When oil lamps became popular, the demand for fuel exploded. These sea lions with their thick blubber became the perfect target. Hunting shifted from occasional sustenance to large-scale commercial slaughter for oil. Their skin was turned into leather and ropes. Their whiskers were used in traditional medicine, and fishermen began seeing them as competitors for fish. The numbers tell a devastating story. In the early 1900s, hunters were still taking around 3,000 sea lions per year. By 1915, that number had plummeted to just 300. By 1930, only a few dozen remained. And by the 1940s, the species was essentially gone. The situation became even worse during World War I and II, as warfare devastated their coastal habitats and disrupted their breeding grounds. It's heartbreaking to think that one of Japan's most impressive native giants was driven to extinction not by accident, but by our endless demand for oil, leather, and resources. By this point, the Japanese sea lion wasn't just declining, it was barely hanging on, essentially swimming on the edge of extinction. Only tiny scattered groups remained, too small and too fragmented to have any real chance of recovery. The population had collapsed beyond the point of no return. The last officially confirmed record came in 1974, when a young individual was captured near Robben Island. After that single heartbreaking moment, no verified sightings have ever been documented again. These days, when people claim to spot a Japanese sea lion in the wild, it almost always turns out to be a Steller sea lion, a much larger and still surviving species. Interestingly, that particular sea lion was named after Georg Wilhelm Steller, a brilliant German naturalist and explorer whose work in the 18th century helped document many iconic Pacific species, including the famous Steller's sea cow that we'll talk about next. This creature belonged to the order Sirenia, the same group as modern manatees and dugongs. Its scientific name was Hydrodamalis gigas, better known as Steller's sea cow. What makes its story so haunting is how recently it vanished, and how little time humans had to truly understand it. This giant first appeared during the Pliocene epoch. At one point, it ranged widely across the Bering Strait, northern Japan, and parts of the northwest American coast. But the ice ages gradually pushed it into a shrinking refuge in the cold waters of the Bering Sea. Then in 1741, something extraordinary happened. A Russian expedition led by Vitus Bering was shipwrecked on a remote island that would later bear his name. Stranded, starving, and freezing, the crew made a discovery that felt almost mythical. Imagine being on the edge of survival and suddenly seeing massive, otherworldly creatures gathering near the shore. Animals so enormous they dwarfed anything most sailors had ever seen. These were Steller's sea cows. They were absolute giants. Adults measured between 26 and 30 feet long and weighed 8 to 10 tons, sometimes even more. That made them among the largest animals of the entire Holocene epoch, comparable in mass to elephants. They had tiny heads, incredibly thick skin covered in crater-like pits from parasites, and a massive layer of blubber that protected them from the icy waters. They lived in small herds, moved slowly through shallow waters, and fed almost exclusively on kelp. Their gentle, peaceful nature earned them the nickname, the barking sea creature, because of the sounds they made. They seemed completely unaware of how vulnerable they were. Georg Wilhelm Steller, the expedition's naturalist, was given a rare gift: months of close observation while the crew survived on the island. He described their meat as surprisingly delicious and incredibly abundant. Because they were so slow and trusting, they were tragically easy to hunt. Once word reached Russia, ships heading to the Alaskan colonies began targeting them deliberately for meat and oil. But here's the tragic twist. Even before Europeans arrived, indigenous peoples of the North Pacific had already been hunting them heavily. By the time Steller's crew found them, only about 2,000 individuals remained. In one of the fastest extinctions ever recorded for such a large animal, Steller's sea cow disappeared completely just 27 years after its official discovery by 1768. A colossal, gentle giant that had survived ice ages, erased in less than 3 decades. Leaving the ocean behind, we now turn to the forests of Southeast Asia and one of the largest land animals lost in the last 300 years, the Kouprey, also known as the Cambodian forest ox. This powerful wild bovine has existed since the Middle Pleistocene. It was primarily found in Cambodia and neighboring countries, with ancient rock carvings at Angkor Wat and the Cardamom Mountains proving long human awareness of its presence. The Kouprey was an imposing animal, measuring 7 to 7.5 feet long, standing up to 6.3 feet at the shoulder and weighing up to 2,000 pounds, comparable to an American bison. Its sharply pointed horns could reach over 3 feet long, especially on adult males. Despite its size, it was notoriously shy. It fed in the early morning and late afternoon, before hiding in dense forests during the day. By the mid-20th century, only around 2,000 individuals were thought to remain. Its downfall came quickly. Diseases and parasites from domestic cattle trophy hunting for its impressive horns, and massive habitat loss to agriculture all took a heavy toll. The last confirmed sighting occurred in 1969. Today, the Kouprey is listed as critically endangered and possibly extinct. Millions of unexploded landmines and snares still litter its former habitat, and repeated search expeditions have found no solid evidence of surviving animals. One more giant that has quietly slipped away. Next, we travel to southern Africa to meet one of the most unique animals on this list, the bluebuck, known scientifically as Hippotragus leucophaeus. This striking antelope holds a somber record. It was the first large mammal in Africa to be officially driven to extinction in modern history. Long ago, during the late Pleistocene and early Holocene, the bluebuck ranged more widely across South Africa. Fossil records and ancient cave paintings prove it once lived in areas where it no longer exists today. What made this animal truly special was its color, a rare bluish-gray coat that could appear almost blue under certain light, a shade extremely uncommon in mammals. It was smaller than its relatives, the roan and sable antelopes, with adult males weighing around 330 pounds. Its long, sharp, ringed horns curved gracefully backward and could exceed 3 feet in length. So here's a fair question. How does an animal with such a memorable appearance disappear so completely? Before European settlers arrived in 1681, the bluebuck population was already low due to natural climate shifts. Once guns reached the Cape region, they became easy targets. They weren't hunted for any particular reason like meat or hides. Their small numbers simply made them vulnerable to steady pressure. Within just a few hundred years of permanent European settlement, the species was gone. The last known individual was shot sometime between 1799 and 1800. Because it vanished so early, we actually know very little about its behavior and ecology. Almost everything we know comes from old written accounts and illustrations rather than direct scientific observation. The bluebuck remains a quiet reminder of how quickly a unique species can slip away when its population is already fragile. Yet the story of lost giants doesn't end on land. One of the most recent extinctions occurred in China's great rivers. The Chinese paddlefish, also called the swordfish sturgeon, was officially declared extinct in 2022, a giant that disappeared during our own lifetime. This enormous freshwater fish could reach 23 feet in length and weigh nearly 1 ton larger than a polar bear. It possessed an exceptionally long, flattened snout filled with electrical sensors that allowed it to hunt effectively even in muddy waters. Ancient records mention this fish being drawn to rhythmic sounds and used in traditional rituals, where its sacrifice was believed to bring rain. For centuries, hunting remained limited. However, 20th century modernization brought industrial fishing fleets and advanced gear. Catches reached over 25 tons in some years, causing the population to collapse. By the 1980s, only around 3,000 breeding adults remained. Although China banned fishing in 1983, illegal poaching persisted and breeding programs failed. The last confirmed records were 2 individuals before 2005. Major surveys between 2017 and 2018 found no trace of the species. Scientists estimate it vanished between 2005 and 2010. The final and most devastating blow came not just from fishing, but from the Gajoba Dam built in 1981. It blocked their ancient migration routes and split the population into isolated fragments, breaking their life cycle forever. A silent river giant gone in the modern age. Another heartbreaking loss from the same region is the baiji, or Chinese river dolphin, the second giant from the Yangtze River system to disappear. This small dolphin, weighing up to 370 pounds, was much smaller than ocean dolphins. It had a distinctive pale bluish-gray back, a low triangular dorsal fin that resembled a waving flag, tiny eyes and short fins. Despite its modest size, it was incredibly fast and agile when threatened. For centuries, the baiji was a beloved cultural symbol along the Yangtze River, representing peace and prosperity. It was even regarded as a national treasure of China and frequently appeared in art and folklore. Its decline began after the Great Leap Forward in 1958, when traditional beliefs were heavily criticized. Hunting for meat and hides suddenly increased. As China industrialized rapidly, the river faced severe pollution, dredging heavy boat traffic, fishing nets, and overfishing of its prey. The construction of the Three Gorges Dam further restricted its habitat and intensified boat activity. Conservation efforts started in the 1970s with hunting bans, protected areas, and breeding programs. However, these came too late. The beige proved extremely difficult to capture and even harder to keep alive in captivity. The most famous captive individual, Chi-Chi, lived for 22 years before passing away in 2002, marking the death of the last known living beige. A 2006 survey found no signs of any survivors. Although a credible video emerged in 2007 and a few unconfirmed sightings were reported as recently as 2018 and 2024, most experts believe the species is functionally extinct. What makes this history so unsettling is simple. Life did not just survive these disasters, it caused many of them. And if this story tells us anything, it is this. The world we know today is not permanent. It is just the latest version of a planet that has already rewritten itself many times before. What do you think about this early Earth? Leave a comment below. Don't forget to hit follow to stay updated with the latest information. Thanks for watching.